Hi, I'm Charlie Parker from Gardenex. Is that sound level okay? It sounds awful to me. Um, yeah, it's a good name to have when you're trying to get into a blues bar in Chicago. Okay, I'm going to be talking all about the US garden market. Helping me is going to be Caitlin Lesczynski. We'll be testing you all on her the spelling of her surname later. Special prize for the one who gets it right. Caitlin actually works with the UK Trade and Investment Office in New York, and she'll be telling you a bit later on about all the services that UK Trade and Investment can provide to help you with your exports to the States. I've been working in the garden industry for 30 years, and done a lot of business in the past in the States, and working a lot with Gardenex on events in the United States. So I'll be telling you all I know in the next quarter of an hour, and probably for the last 13 minutes you can ask me questions about it. So without further ado, I'm going to talk a bit about, first of all, about the size of the market, and then the kind of main distribution channels there are, and then ultimately tell you a little bit about how we, Gardenex, can help you with your exports. So, first of all, the size of the market. The US is a huge country, and many people get carried away thinking of, wow, we can get into this huge US market. It's 314 million people. The country area is twice as big as the UK. Oregon is bigger. The single state of Oregon is bigger in area than the whole of the UK. And I have all these stupid facts in my head, like the distance from Los Angeles to New York is equivalent to the distance from London to Baghdad. So you're kind of talking about an area which is the size of a continent and more. So it's a huge area. California, the state of California, would rank as the 8th largest country economy in the world, just on its own. So it's a huge market. Over the years, there have been various estimations of how big the lawn and garden market is. The National Gardening Association does a survey each year, and in its most recent report, it put the size of the market at just under 35 billion. A big increase on the previous year. For several years, that figure has actually been going down and was in the high 20s for a little while. There's a group called Garden Media. They put the size of the market at about $58 billion. And the inimitable Jeff Morey from, actually it's IGC Retailer nowadays, but when it was called Nursery Retailer a few years ago, he estimated the size of the market at getting on for 120 billion. But I think Jeff's always been a bit of an optimist as far as the size of the market is concerned. There are some huge players in the market. There's Home Depot and Lowe's, who are the equivalent of B&Q and Homebase here. People see the number of stores and think, wow, that's a great opportunity for me. So you've got 2,250 stores for Home Depot and Lowe's at about 18 to 30. But of course, there are all kinds of issues with dealing with those kind of stores. And first of all, have you got the capacity to deal with them? And do you want to go through all the pain of dealing with those companies? I'll come back to that a bit later on. And there are it's estimated there are around 15,500 to 16,000 garden centres or nurseries. I've been speaking too much today, I'm losing my voice. By the way, I'm very nervous because we do have two people sitting in the audience who have been working in the US garden market for 33 years. So they're probably going to say that everything I'm saying is a load of rubbish later on, but I'll introduce you. This Graham and Michelle Kinsman, who've been coming here since, was it 81? 82. So I'll do a brief introduction of them a bit later on. Okay, market trends. It's been a very tough time in the last few years. There's been the economic crisis, but there have been a lot of positive things. There's the strength of the grow your own market. As a figure, yeah, their food gardening was worth nearly 3.5 billion in 2013. Some of the recent trends, partly on the back of the economic climate, staycations, people staying at home and spending time in their yards and gardens and making the most of them. Outdoor living, tailgating. It's not following the car in front very closely, it's going out to baseball events and drinking lots of beer and having a barbecue and, grill. And yeah, barbecues, 15 million sold annually in the States, huge figure. As I mentioned before, the most recent annual survey by the National Gardening Association showed the biggest annual increase in sales this century, 18%. I did this slide a while ago for a previous presentation. I just love the phrase frugal fatigue, the fact that people are a bit fed up with just saving money all the time. Okay, I want to talk about where most British companies find their niche within the US market. Because actually most British companies, you don't see many British companies' products in the likes of Home Depot and Walmart. Most of the opportunities lie in a few sectors of the industry. Mail order being probably one of the most prominent ones. I think most of our Gardenex members, all of whom are looking to export to the States, a lot of them will start at least by working with mail order companies, because mail order companies make it easy. They have central warehousing, they have import experience, they arrange all the freight, they in effect do all their marketing. They may well take shots of your particular products in situ in the States. And they visit shows like Glee or Spoga Gaffer. So they will and they're always looking for products that are a bit different to the niche products that you don't find in the big box stores. Some examples: Gardener's Supply, Plough and Hearth, Frontgate, Charlie's Greenhouse Supply, are just some of the examples of companies who handle quite a lot of UK products. And some of these companies also have European buying offices. And of course, in recent years, the big trend has not been for the paper mail order catalogues. There's also the internet sales side. Amazon, of course, is going from strength to strength. You get some of the retailers, such as Williams-Sonoma, who also offer internet sales. And if you are brave enough to try and think about supplying the big boys, such as Walmart and Home Depot, I'm told that it can be easier to try and get into their .com operations initially rather than to try and go through the pain barrier of dealing with their actual store operations. So that's mail order. That's a good target for most UK companies. Garden centres, as I mentioned before, there's maybe about 16,000 garden centres, nurseries. Actually, a lot of them are nurseries, which handle maybe some hard goods, some basic hard goods. But there are some that are beginning to be perhaps a bit like some of the destination garden centres that we have over here in the UK and in Europe. There's some examples there. The main thing I would want to point out, there's really no national chain of garden centres. Most of them are actually quite small by comparison with people like Dana in Germany or Wyvale here. Armstrong bought Pike, which is based in Georgia, is my memory right? Pike went into Chapter 11 a few years ago, and Armstrong bought them up. So Armstrong are based in California, Pike in Georgia, but they only have 47 stores between them, and they're the biggest. And the IGC Top 100 list, which Jeff Murray produces each year, that immediately shows you that there aren't many multiple stores. Only 8 of the listing has more than 10 stores, and 35 just have 1 store. And many of them are maybe just in one state, or indeed in just one metropolitan area. That figure there, 30 billion across the 16,000 garden centres, that was one of the estimates of the size of the market. One of the things that's different about the States is the strength of the landscaping side for many garden centres. A lot of garden centres will have a strong landscaping arm, which is quite different to here in the UK. There isn't vodka in here, honestly. Okay, how do you serve the US market? It's such a huge geographical area. As I was saying, quite fragmented. Most people will need some kind of distributor or stock and market your products. But this brings with it some pitfalls as well. Some of the distributors, or indeed, yes, the distributors will sometimes still work through some of the big wholesalers. A lot of the wholesalers will charge you a princely sum to take part in their shows, and some of the distributors will have to trawl around maybe even dozens of regional shows in the period between about September and January, I think these shows are. There are some, and the good thing about distributors, they'll sort out the logistics, the delivery, invoicing, sales support, and everything, things that you find it very difficult to do from the UK. There are some specialist people for the growers and landscape sectors, and when you go to shows such as the National Hardware Show, some of the big distributors in the market, some of whom specialise in UK products, exhibit there. So there's Bosmere Inc., which handles quite a few British brands, and TDI. Just seeing if Charles Stimston-Argyle is walking past. He's one of the guys. He's the president of TDI. He's here at the show. And then we have wholesalers, buying groups, and others. There's all kinds of different. There's huge buying groups such as Ace Hardware, Do It Best, True Value, Orgill. Some of these have, I think it's 4,500 members, but again, it's a question of how you supply them, because their members, a lot of them are actually kind of independent stores. It's how you fulfill their requirements. There are some very big wholesalers around the market. Many of them belong to something called Grow Group. There's a Ret Sales, L&L Supply, and several others. One of the most important ways that you can get into the market is use long-established wholesalers such as Kinsman, who are here, and I will get Graham to say a few words in a minute. As I say, many of these companies will have their own in-house shows and have huge catalogues of products, some of the big guys like Arete and so on. So the question is, how much time will they spend on promoting your product? You have to do a lot of legwork there. You have some central buying co-ops like Master Nursery, which have around 750 independent garden centre members. You have the mass merchandisers, Walmart, Target, Costco. Again, I would say they're not number one targets for UK companies. And then you have a wide raft of other potential customers. There's feed and seed stores, there's gift shops, there's department stores, supermarkets. You might have specialist furniture retailers if you're trying to get into the furniture sector. Obviously the landscape sector if you're handling landscape products. The inimitable Rick Ponce, who produces a Smarty Ponce newsletter on a kind of monthly basis, identifies 28 channels of distribution in the States, potential customers. So where can you get information on the market? There's all kinds of trade magazines. There's a few examples. I mentioned the NGA survey. There's a company called Package Facts. If you're looking to get into the furniture sector, there's Casual Living's Powerhouse 100, mentions a lot of the leading patio-type stores. There's trade shows such as the Hardware Show, the IGC Show. Atlanta Gift Fair is quite good for gardening. And I mentioned Rick Ponce. So where do we come in? What can Gardenex do? We have a US lawn and garden market report. It includes over 200 records of a lot of the main people that you might be wanting to export to in the States. We've got lots of database information, not just for the US. We have 11,000 company records. So by market, you can get information on whether it's garden centres or distributors. As a member, that's an exclusive benefit. We have a library with lots of information. We buy some very good US directories of home centres, and We have lots of company catalogues. And we do lots of export advice with some tips on dealing with the US. Trade shows. We take a group to the National Hardware Show each year, which is in Las Vegas. Next year, the dates are May the 5th to 7th. SMEs can normally get funding through UK Trade and Investment. This year, it was at £2,000. Hopefully, it'll be the same for next year. We produce Gardenex previews of the group, which we send to hundreds of buyers in advance of the show, do a lot of PR, do a lot of things to make sure that the people who exhibit at the show and spend their money on, spend a lot of money being there, get the chance to maximize the number of buyers who come to their stands. At the IGC shows in Chicago and IGC East, there's 10% discount for first-time exhibitors at the show for Gardenex members. And there are loads of other shows in the States covering perhaps specific sectors or specific regions. There's something called the NLGS, which is kind of speed dating kind of thing where you spend 10 minutes meeting with potential customers. So how do you find these new customers? Well, I've talked about our Lawn and Garden report and database. There's the Meet the Buyer events. There's some of the people that we've had at the events in the past. So Ret Sales, one of the big regional wholesalers, Bosmere Inc., World Source Partners. At this show, we had the International Buyers Connect sessions, and Graham saw a number of companies which I think he was quite interested in at the show. We have a library of information. We provide consultation services. We do visit the market kind of events. And I've mentioned the database. So that is, in a nutshell, what we do. What I would recommend is you come and see me, have one-to-one sessions. Maybe I'm based in the International Buyer Center here. I'll be happy to talk to individuals about what we can do. Some of the guys here have already been to some of the shows, so they've got experience.
Hello, everyone. I'm from Birmingham.
Birmingham, Alabama.
Yes, and about there, yeah. And after university in England, I got into the advertising business, and then got a job in the United States in 1969, working for Polaroid, the camera company, in advertising. But in 1975, a former boss of mine in England had invented a remarkable compost bin called the Rotocrop. You're much too young to remember it, but it had sliding panels, and it took England by storm. It was advertised in the Daily Telegraph and the sensation at Chelsea and all that kind of thing. So that's how we got into the gardening business, and have been doing it for, we started our own company because Rotocrop went under in about 1981. So we started our own business, and immediately we came to England and came to Glee, and 30 years ago found all kinds of wonderful stuff manufactured in the United Kingdom that nobody was distributing in the United States. And in retrospect, it was as easy as falling off a log to be successful with English products. Watering cans from Birmingham. I could go on and on about all the great stuff. And as recently as 2002, 75% of what we sold was manufactured in the United Kingdom. And I'm delighted to say, I'm surprised that Charlie didn't mention it, that in 1994, I got the Roy Hay Award. And that was a wonderful ceremony in the what is it, Directors, Institute of Directors in London, yes, and a beautiful engraved cut glass bowl and on and on. But by 2002, that was the peak. And thereafter, in Britain, a lot of companies closed down manufacturing and started sourcing things from China and India, and we really had to go along. But what I want to talk about today is how exciting it is to be back at Glee visiting, and how wonderful the sessions, 7 of them, that Charlie and Gardenex dished up. We had been continuously at Glee since 1982. Even in 2001, we happened to be in Slovakia when 9/11 happened. So although the Atlantic was closed down for 2 weeks, we were able to make our way to England, and we were at Glee. But after 2011, we reckoned it had become so irrelevant to our needs that we stopped coming in 2012 and 2013. And to be honest, in 2014, we came with not particularly high hopes, but with the help of Gardenex, putting out the word and our company profile to people like yourselves who might be interested in selling to us, we then chose 7 with whom we could have these famous 10-minute sit-downs. And that worked amazingly well, because it wasn't like us wandering onto somebody's stand and with the stars and stripes on the label tag and having to explain who we were, because everybody who came in to talk to us knew who we were, had looked at the catalog and website, and knew the kinds of things that we were looking for. So that was fine. But also just wandering around Glee, we have found a great deal of stuff, and we feel fairly confident, Michelle and I, that this is the beginning of a substantial resurgence in the amount of business we do with stuff sourced in the United Kingdom, especially England. We don't do very much business with Scotland, I'm glad to say. So that about wraps it up, I think. We are very happy to be here. Yes, we are niche marketers. Absolutely, we don't tangle with the big boys. And you should all get on to Rick Ponce's newsletter, which anybody can sign up for, because he did a remarkable newsletter just a couple of weeks ago about how difficult it was to deal with the distributors in the United States, because they all want $20,000 just for you to show, and then you have to go and do the selling anyway. So who needs that? And I won't name any names, but a couple of exhibitors and people we know here have fallen out of love with the distributors just for that reason.
I would also say, you're in the right industry when statistics on tailgating and staycations are mentioned, because that certainly is something that I didn't know. But I'm from UK Trade and Investment, Caitlin Lesczynski. I work out of the New York Consulate. So UK Trade and Investment, who many of you may already be familiar with, is part of the Foreign Commonwealth Office. It's kind of the business development agency of the UK government. And so we're based at many of the overseas consulates, helping to bring business either from the US to invest in the UK or to bring UK companies into the US. So I have the pleasure of working with lawn and garden companies, mostly product manufacturers from the UK, and bringing them into the US market. And so I had seen Charlie's presentation before I kind of made up mine, and so I'm give a few elements that may not have been covered in his, since he did such a thorough job of covering a lot of the main things you should be thinking about. I get to cover things like legal and regulations, which is much less exciting. But I'll go through it fairly quickly. Just an introduction to UKTI will be the first item that I cover, but I would recommend there's several different marketing brochures kind of at the front of this stand that will do much better justice to what UKTI can offer new exporters and experienced exporters. So I definitely recommend picking up a few of the brochures that we have kind of at the front of this nicely decorated Business is Great stand. So just to kind of go quickly through, UKTI, like I said, covers many different sectors. What the real aim of what we try to do is to identify what would be best for you as the customer. If you're already exporting in other markets, we're not going to provide you with the same services for a first-time exporter, for someone who's just learning about the process of warehousing and logistics. We're going to really try and find tailored support that we can offer, be it determining what research proposal you really want to take out for research, identifying distributors, identifying buying trends in one specific region. And so this is just kind of a list of the different services. Again, you can find more information online, but anything from kind of like I mentioned, doing research on a specific topic. We can review your different marketing materials, changing things over to pounds and dollars and those things that you wouldn't think are confusing, since theoretically we all speak English in the two countries, but surprisingly there are many words. For example, bits and bobs is something that I'd never heard before working for the consulate, and I just love it. But all sorts of bits and bobs are things that we can offer from UKTI. So Charlie did a good job. I'm not going to kind of go over some of the statistics again, but just, the reality of the US market is it's very saturated. That's kind of the frank reality. That shouldn't scare anyone off. There's a lot of opportunities available, especially in sectors like the lawn and garden market, where kind of the British heritage is a plus. The garden products, a lot of different states and regions in the U.S., they want to see that traditional British garden product. So it's a busy market, it's a full market, but if you do the research right, if you have the right people on your team, like Gardenex, you've done your research, you're going to be okay. And that's kind of, UKTI is there to fill in the gaps. So just a quick map. Just the scale of the US is really meant to indicate there's different buying trends anywhere you're going to go, from geography to demographics. Certain areas have more of a priority on aging populations. So there's going to be different kind of standards for and demand for gardening products in those areas. The East Coast alone has, these 5 major cities, among many others that aren't even listed here. But you're going to have major garden centers, major different buying trends just on the East Coast alone. Furthermore, it's going to take you several hours to traverse the whole kind of East Coast area. Boston to DC, that's a 10-hour drive alone. So if you are thinking of coming to the US for a visit, I would say definitely don't tire yourself out and try to pack all these things in one day. We'll happy to talk with you for a very well thought out visit to the US plan, where we identify the best regions for you and come up with a way of kind of realistically getting to them. Setting up in the US, or even just establishing a manufacturing partner or a trading partner, it's going to be all the same considerations that you had when you were first starting a business. Maybe we can put this up, that makes more sense. But you want to put a good think into them. And the thing that I could recommend the most is finding a lawyer who's familiar with UK and US business practice. The US is particularly fond of lawsuits, and you don't want to be on the tail end of that. And you won't necessarily have to have anything to worry about if you've done the front end work. And that's going to involve a few of the different considerations that I put up here, but I highlighted most specifically, insurance, product liability, patents, copyrights. Having a trademark for the name of your corporation isn't the same thing as having, a patent on every product line that you have. So UKTI has a lot of this information already categorized into kind of off-the-shelf reports that we're happy to have a conversation and send those to you right away. We have lawyers that we've worked with frequently in the past who are familiar with US and UK kind of business relations. And we have resources we can send you on the major things you need to consider and all sorts of guidance about where you can turn, because it's a lot there, but there's no reason that you have to start from scratch with it. Gardenex and UKTI ourselves, we have a lot of this information available. I'm not sure how we are with time, but fine. Okay, so I'll just go quickly through the rest of it. If you're here today, you've thought about all these things already. Why do business in the US? It's an excellent market. There are a lot of similarities between the UK and the US, especially in terms of buying trends, types of products, even setup of kind of the business itself. We do have a strong rule of law here. If you've thought all that out, your product will be protected. Your business will be stable once you get into the market. So a number of different things to consider, but it is an excellent market. It's the UK and the US have a partnership that has many different opportunities. The US is the UK's biggest export market, so we are great partners, and there is a lot of opportunity there. Some challenges, again, just the regional difference, the consumer preference from East Coast to West Coast, North to South, state to state is different. This is the same with regulations. Most regulations aren't going to be mandated at a federal, national level. Unfortunately, they really trickle down to state or municipality level. So you'll have some states like California on the West Coast, which is very strict when it comes to chemical components, for example. So, if you have a fertilizer product, it's going to be more heavily regulated in California than, say, West Virginia. So, you may be able to trade your product across state lines fairly easily with your distribution channel, but you will need to regulate the product to the highest standard of wherever it is that it's going to be sold, which can sometimes be tricky. So just a few other things to consider. Again, I wouldn't think of them as obstacles, but opportunities for you to really shore up your business here and make yourself a very viable, competitive product in the US. I don't really need to go into kind of the detail of all this. I wanted to give an example about, a brick and mortar versus manufacturing. I kind of covered a bit, regulations, legality is going to be different state by state. There are certainly benefits to setting up a brick and mortar in the US, taking on a manufacturing plant, and then, selling your product afterwards, because that could cut down a lot on the importing costs and the shipping costs. So all these different elements are things that you and I can have a conversation with to really hash out a tailored, timeline and a tailored research proposal for your product. Just some major things again about manufacturing, but this will be for more experienced exporters. Once you've maybe done some mail order or you've done work with the big box retailers and you really want to be here in the US, just a few things to consider. And I'm going to send out the PowerPoint to everybody that was here today. We have your information. So just kind of want to go through it briefly to just give you an idea of some of the things that you should be thinking about if you are an experienced exporter and you're looking to kind of take on the next step. Just some really important other sources of information to finish up. Select USA is essentially the equivalent to UKTI in the US. They're going to be able to really help you identify these local economic development agencies. New York, where I'm based, a lot of the regulations for New York are regulated by the Economic Development Agency. It's like a local, government. So you can find that information on Select USA. The U.S. Embassy in London is a really great resource, especially for finding lawyers. They have a lot of information on American lawyers that are based in the UK. And then finally, I did just want to announce, we've recently launched a new scheme called e-exporting. So this is going to be kind of the bread and butter for anything having to do with mail order, selling the product online. It's extremely trendy. Here and in the US, everyone's buying stuff on Amazon. And so this will give you some really good information and resources for how to tackle that. And the website link is just gov.uk/e-exporting. So I recommend that. That's how you spell my last name. It's not that hard. Although, unfortunately, it's in my email. So I think I've lost a lot of emails over the years. But please don't hesitate to get in touch. We have a wealth of information, a lot of stuff that we've already done for people like yourselves previously. So it's just a matter of sending you a PowerPoint, a document about law. I'm happy to send that out to whomever pretty easily. And then we can just have a conversation about how to really get the ball rolling for you. So I think that's set for all of us. Thank you so much for coming to the presentation. It's great to see a couple familiar faces and look forward to hopefully having a conversation with you. And I think we're both available for one-to-ones or just come up to us afterwards. Thank you.